Good morning. Good morning. Let's get those spirits up. We are going to inform regarding the advancement in the health plan. As we do so every Tuesday, but being that we have to be providing information regarding coronavirus, we are also going to, this morning, to talk about the topic, which, well, information is very important. It is part of the campaign in order to face this pandemic. If there's misinformation, if there's hearsay, if there's panic, well, you're not helping, you're rather affecting. So we should all be very well informed. And the plan that we have been applying in Mexico, well, it has given us results. Okay, so it's going according to what we expected ever since the beginning. It's within its stages, within its three stages. We're still on the first stage, and we are prepping for the second stage, but we cannot get ahead of ourselves. We need to act with serenity and not allow us to be manipulated because, well, people should help us with that. We have the support of citizens, which is the most important thing, and we are going to face this circumstance, this special circumstance, this epidemic. Where does our strength lies? Well, it lies on our people, it lies on its culture. What haven't Mexicans withstood over history? Everything. Invasions, floods, earthquakes, epidemics, corrupt governments, and we still stand. The same thing goes for what's going on right now. We are going to press forward. We need to have faith in our people and act with awareness. We should not fall in the trap of misinformation, so that's why we are going to be as much time needed providing information. So I'll take advantage and I'll let you know that I will be going over the weekend to Oaxaca because on the 21st, well, that's the celebration of it's a birth anniversary of the best president in Mexico's history, Benito Juarez. So I would like to ask the citizens, the citizens on Oaxaca, France, that, well, we love each other very much. Well, I would like to ask them that for this time, I would only gather with the townspeople of Gelata for we to hold a ceremony there, and later on we are going to have time to visit you across different towns. This is due to not, you know, allow questioning, stating that the president is not setting the example or it's not taking care of himself. All of this, everything that our adversary can use against us. So we need to go around that so that they don't have any reason to be attacking us. So that they are cornered in order to make up things, right? But we won't give them any reason. Okay, so I would just like to ask that from our friends in Oaxaca on the 21st. And I would also like to comment that tomorrow we're going to have the anniversary of the oil expropriation, and we are going to hold the ceremony for that in the Pemex Tower. Also with a few participants, but we cannot forget what it meant, what the oil expropriation meant back in 1938. More so now than ever, being that we are rescuing oil ourselves. So I would like to inform you regarding that, and we are also going to listen the report from Dr. Hugo Lopez Gatel. And well, all of our trust is placed upon him because he's a specialist in this matter. He knows quite a lot. He has experience, and he is a serious individual, an honest individual, a responsible one. So he will be informing us regarding coronavirus, and then we are going to inform the campaign for renting the in order to face the addiction problem. This is a much more straightforward campaign in order to direct and to raise awareness regarding the damage that drugs cause. So we are going to broaden this campaign. This is going to be an intensive kind of campaign because it causes many disgraces to use drugs. Well, that causes many disgraces, a lot of pain, a lot of sadness. Most than anything, in young people, most than anything within families, and we need to be able to counteract all the promotion that it's being done by showing an image that that world, the drug world, the crime world, a life of pleasure. It's not a life of pleasure, but it's a living hell, truth be told. Even the most famous criminals, well, they need to be on the lookout. They don't have any peace, and that's no kind of life. And what's worse is that there are drugs that destroy lives within months. So these drugs are completely evil, and they finish with the lives of youngsters. So we need to address that. We should not forget to address the causes that originate violence and suffering on our people in order to be able to have a better society, in order to have a happy society. So those are the two things that we are going to deal with. And now Dr. Hugo is going to take the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And good morning, Secretary, Directors, Coordinator. Good day to each and every one of you. Well, we are going to talk about the technical report that we provide every day, sometimes twice a day, and I would like respectfully to summon your attention to the technical aspects of this report and not to get distracted with interpretation of a different nature, responsibility, and commitment, the ones that we have acquired towards the president of the nation, with the minister of health, and with the whole country. It's to provide a faithful report on everything that's going on, all the things that we anticipate that are going to happen, and every one of the things that we have planned out ever since January 3rd for what will happen. So, if throughout our exposition it so turns out that the topics that we are presenting you, the prevention and precaution and control measures that we're explaining, well, all of their foundations, all their reason of being, all their scientific baseline, if they are disvirtued because they are trying to bring this topic to the politic sphere, well, that wouldn't be beneficial for the society. And I'm saying this because ever since the beginning, we did our best in order to keep this in the public attention as a matter of professional character, of technical character, where we require actions on behalf of the government, but also from the community. And the community society is comprised by different institutions, different organizations, from the public sector of the government, of the social sector, as well as from the private sector. And all of these organizations have a role to play. And one of the roles that they need to play, or that they can play, and I hope that they decide in a clear fashion and in a consistent fashion to act, it's up, it's keeping up serenity, it's keeping up order, it's keeping up communication, and to keeping up paying attention to the technical aspects that are required in order to be able to respond. If this doesn't happen like that, then there's going to be a lot of confusion that will permeate towards the citizenship. Worldwide epidemics, as any massive phenomena, as any collective phenomena, starts to generate a lot of anxiety, and we have stated that, and we have stated that also with a scientific baseline, with a technical baseline. This has been studied thoroughly because this is a phenomena that provides companionship to infectious epidemics, because uncertainty, the perception of a threat, well, with that, it starts to accelerate, it starts to multiply in the measure that people can feel unprotected, that can feel without control of things, of circumstances. But whenever we have the opportunity, as we have so today, as Mexico has had the opportunity, whenever this epidemic started with Wuhan, China, with a small sprout of 44 cases of pneumonia in a animal market, Well, the opportunity has been to be able to identify with scientific evidence, with believable data comprised that are comprised and gathered by the WHO by using its capabilities and faculties and their legal framework. Well, they have allowed us to be able to identify the progression stages. They have been allowing us to identify how does this virus work so within the human body. How does this virus work so it can be transmitted. In the course of this epidemic, and I would like to explain that scenario number one. Scenario number one is the entrance scenario of the virus. It's when the virus is being imported, and this has happened in each and every one of the 174 countries that have had at least one case. There is a stage where the virus comes in. How does this virus comes in? Well, let's not look side to the fact that there are people that are infected and that are during the contagious period, which is much more intense once symptoms starts. But we have also noticed that within a few days before symptoms appear, well, we can have also infection. They can be contagious, and these people come into the country through different ways within a country. And this ways, it's not only a single entrance door, and it's not only a few individuals. We are talking about millions of individuals, not thousands, nor hundreds, nor tens. We're talking about million peoples that go from one place to another. There are regions within the world, particularly in Europe, that they don't even have physical borders. It's as if it was, for practical purposes, as if it was a single country. And even though they have political identities that turn them into countries, geographically speaking, it works as if it was a single country. Why am I saying this? Because ever since the beginning of the epidemic, and as a part of this fear reaction, as a part of this anxiety response, in the face of uncertainty, well, we've held the expectation that one of the possible mechanisms in order to be able to control the virus transmission could be to close out borders. It could be to prohibit transit of people and transit of goods through countries, even if it's through land, through air, or through water. And well, this is not possible. This is not possible without causing damage, damage of unforeseeable consequences, possibly trampling towards communities. Because if you don't allow people's mobility, then the society would come to a halt. And whenever the society comes to a halt, then you're threatening with the possibility of having supplies for your daily life, such as food, clothing, tools, health supplies, amongst others. And this is the reason why, ever since a long time ago, ever since the 1990s, the WHO, alongside the worldwide community, even from the Maximum Forum of Global Politics Consultation, the UN, well, they stated the directing statements of the worldwide or international rule book. And from my own standpoint, the most important one is that the protection measures, prevention measures, control measures for epidemics, well, they should be done according to the risk, both in terms of the magnitude and size of the danger, as well as in the mechanisms that would allow us to face it. And specifically talking the worldwide hygiene rule book, the one that's standing right now, it says that it should be done without interfering with people's mobility and international commerce. And this is not a whim. This is not something that has not been thought out thoroughly. On the contrary, this is something that was thoroughly analyzed in the 10 years almost that this thought and approval process of this worldwide hygiene rule book took, right? So at this point in time, it seems that the world has gone into a stage of huge uncertainty. Uncertainty from the society, uncertainty from their political leaders, and they are taking different decisions that if you perform a cold and careful analysis, you would realize that they are unrelated with the technical and scientific stance that come from institutions that have had international prestige as well as national prestige, both in the U.S., in Canada, in the United Nations, in New Zealand, in Australia, in Latin America, in different regions. Well, it seems that they are giving up on the face of the geopolitical pressure without looking through without looking for a organized reflection to look at the appreciation based on evidence of the phenomena and political decisions regarding that are being taken at the end of the day. So I just like to close out my take with this idea, and I would like to highlight that we still have the opportunity of making organized decisions. We still have the opportunity of placing the different elements of the repertoire of interventions for contention, for mitigation, for hospital scaling, of reorganizing the health services, also communicating risks, also basic hygiene that will allow us to fight in Mexico the next stages. And I would like to mention the stages and wrap it up with that. We have viral import, where we have tens of cases that can infect all the way to the first generations. So they have a first contact with individuals here. Scenario number two, communitary infection, where we have infection from one contact to the other, and some other ones in different chains of infection, but we're going to have hundreds of cases scattered throughout the country in different groups, and then an epidemic where it is not possible for us to be able to have traceability in order to track the transmission or infection shades, and there are infections occurring simultaneously around the country. So at that point in time, particularly on scenario number two, on late scenario two or early scenario three, the main challenge, not the only one, but the main challenge is to be able to take care of everyone that needs an advanced medical assistance, specifically talking about inpatient care and possibly assisted breathing with, well, as it's known, breathing assistance. And we should not saturate health units if there's a higher volume that would represent 80% of infections that are going to be healed spontaneously thanks to our immune system. What we see in different countries, and the countries that are facing the most important moment of the epidemic, talking about Western Europe specifically, is that in those places where there is saturation, well, it depends a lot on the over demand that represents the biggest volume of patients, the ones that have mild symptoms and that could be kept under remote observation in their houses without the need of approaching any health unit. And whoever has the need of being assessed and screened and taken care of specifically, which are elderly people, well, they should have those spaces available at the doctor's office, at the urgency units in the hospitals in order to be taken care of. And this represent a very small percentage in comparison. It's around 5% of everybody that shows this disease. It's not 5% of the population. It's not 5% of the population itself. It's 5% of people that show symptoms. I wanted to show this landscape because yesterday I thought that the different public reactions, mostly from the media, well, they took two elements that I would like to explain. And talking that these elements should not contaminate one another. The first element that I'm talking about, I'd say that it's a perspective of several stands that ever since the beginning are placed towards a political agenda, and that it will seem that they don't have any will of contributing towards the cause of the in the superior interest of this country, which is keeping order within the nation, and to provide useful information that will allow for decision making with a truthful baseline of information. Nonetheless, I'm concerned that different voices that are very authorized, that are quite respected, and those voices possibly motivated by this uncertainty sensation, this anxiety sensation, which is natural and perfectly understandable, predictable, and legitimate. Well, they also took part of that crooked perspective. So our commitment should be, let's focus on the technical aspect of things, the trustworthiness that have been placed upon me by authorities and health authorities in order to direct this epidemic. Well, I would drive that, and I would drive that as a technical officer, and I shouldn't be taken to the political sphere because I'm not interested in that, and I don't have any role to play regarding that in Mexico. So I will be showing the situation. If you would show this map, as you all know, but I say this every day, it's not made in Mexico, it's made by the WHO and is shown whenever they summarize the information worldwide. And what we can appreciate, and we are showing this due to transparency on your right hand side of the slide, is the number of accrued cases. But we always like for you to think about what this number means. So we can see that we have accrued 167,500 people that at a certain point in time had the COVID disease, the disease for the new coronavirus 2019. And this amount of people, well, this amount of people will grow every day, and we are looking at the history of an epidemic ever since its beginning and as it's going on right now. But all of us should be perfectly clear that this doesn't mean that at any given point in time, these people are actively infected or that they are infecting others. The strength of being contagious, or the amount of people that have been affected are only the ones that in the last 14 days have presented the disease, because 85% of people that undergo those 10 to 14 days, they stop being contagious, and besides they are recovered completely without any after effects, right? And they are part of a community of people that cannot get infected again, and that group becomes into excellent news because without being affecting people significantly, they become the main mechanism in order to contain the epidemic. As that number grows, the number of recovered people grows, then we are going to be closer to the point when we won't have any infection and the epidemic would extinguish completely within the world. So the number that we have underneath it's 6,000 people. It's a quite unfortunate number because those are the number of people that have passed away. So we can see this and we see this every day for each and every one of the countries, and we will be showing this very soon. Well, we can see what's the magnitude of this epidemic, and we can compare this with other health phenomena. So we have this number 167,000 people accrued in a world that has over 7 billion inhabitants. This is a very big number, and this is why we have this number for each and every one of the countries. And we can see that on each and every one of these countries, this epidemic does not represent over 0.001% of the total population of that country. And this doesn't mean that we are not taking into account the implications of this epidemic, but we should place it on its right dimension. The next slide is Mexico's map, and currently we have 82 confirmed cases, and these confirmed cases the are because they were reported initially. These are the numbers from yesterday. You know that we do this every day. But after analyzing and after studying directly almost 580 people, plus the 171 that were undergoing tests yesterday, so we have almost 700 and around 750 people that had been studied as suspects, whoever is suspect, and we run a test and they can move to the category of discarded case because the explanation of their symptoms is a different disease. But this, besides that, on the next slide we have the different studies that we have performed on contacts, because those contacts are also screened and assessed and they undergo an observation period, and those are over 370 contacts. So we have around 1,100 people that have been assessed, even though through direct suspicion or for being contacts. And what we can tell from this screen is that from confirmed contacts, only 10% show symptoms, and 90% are not showing symptoms. And all of them, all of the contacts are placed on isolation. All of them. And this is exactly the contention mechanism that it's focused and cases. And actually, yesterday, the director of WHO, Mr. Tedious Drevellesus, he was specifically explaining the question, also for Mexico, a directed question from a reporter saying what are the conditions specific for Mexico, and his response alongside Dr. Maria Hankerford, he said the same ones for the rest of the world. I would think that this is the last slide. Okay, no, next one. Okay, yeah, I will be sharing this news with you because we do believe it's positive, and it's also been a source of questions. And it said, how much are we going to assign in order to contain this epidemic? And we have stated that we will expect a number of almost 3 billion pesos in the different supplies, and this also allows us to place in perspective what the need is. The need was estimated with a technical baseline and with the help of everybody involved in the coordinating this. Who are those? Everyone. And I will also like to mention this because this is important. To fight an epidemic requires the participation of the whole state, the whole government, and society as a whole. This is a fundamental principle that it's been known ever since many years ago in order to have an effective response. So in Mexico, the whole federal government is involved in this from its president all the way to the last organizations that we might have on the public administration. Of course, going through the health ministry, which is a coordinator, and the different organisms that are participants in this response, also state governments. And we, as we have stated, and we stated this in the real time moment when it occurred in the National Conference of Governors, played a very important role because it placed this prepping and response. They show their will to manage their states. State governments are recognized by the health ministry as health authorities, and they said that they were going to act, and they said that they were going to act in a scenario of political neutrality. So governors, the two female governors with different political perspectives, they decided that politics shouldn't be involved when making health decisions. All of them are going to act accordingly and aligned with the federal government. And within the society, we have had countless encounters and agreements with organizations, with social organizations, and with private ones in order to make this a response to be articulate and coordinated. So what we have seen from the different actions, well, sometimes it has a little bit of variability in the implantation calendar, but that doesn't mean that it didn't came from general operation. And I will be talking about schools in particular, the educational branch, which coordinates 32 educational branches, coordinated by the Minister of Public Education, and we are also an institution that coordinates with that answer. Specifically talking the selected date in order to do this, which is on March 23rd. Well, that was the date that was selected so that in between March 17th and 20th, we could articulate the mechanisms in order to instate these measures, being that this was a measure that was planned beforehand and not a precipitated measure. If any of the states have these mechanisms ready and can implement them, then that would be great. But I would just like to wrap it up saying one last thing. This is not going to be a short epidemic. We have stated that before, but I would like to be very clear on that. We have said that the epidemic can last at least 12 weeks, which is how much it lasted in China. It reached a maximum point around half those weeks and then it started to decrease. Not necessarily due to extreme contention measures that were taken over there. We would perform studies, we would have studies where we are going to take a representative sample of the population. We are going to take a blood sample and we're going to analyze antibodies in order to see if they developed immunity. And we are going to see the high percentage of people that were infected, even though they didn't have any, they didn't got ill. In some countries, such as in Germany, the political leadership of the state stated what it's a scientific reality that they expect that almost 7 of every 10 people will develop antibodies as they have been exposed to the virus. But that doesn't mean that 7 out of 10 people are going to be sick, and much less than 7 out of 10 are going to have a illness that would get complicated, that it's a delicate one, right? So we would clarify this later on. We would clarify what was the main strength in the case of China to take care of this epidemic. But the truth is that it's on its way out and that it lasted around 12 weeks, that's 3 months during this initial process. So that will be the minimum scenario. That's a period of time that'll last, and nonetheless, being that every country has different features, it could last a little bit longer. We could have secondary peaks that would increase the mitigation and control measures. And if you anticipate these measures early on enough, you would distinguish the capability of the society to keep them. And if interventions right now are useful, possibly they are going to have a higher usefulness later on. So we cannot, or we should not, acting responsibly, we should not wear society out. And this is a lesson learned from the world, but also in Mexico back in 2009, when the different interventions that were taken first with a technical baseline that was coordinated by the Minister of Health back then with a technical baseline. Then they started to implement those measures very early because the state had a lot of anxiety, and that affected political leaders. And we took decisions in advance that technically were not indispensable, of course, within a context where we had an epidemic that was created in the region of North America, and thus we had a higher uncertainty on its course. Let's not exhaust interventions way too early. Let's remain calm. I'm not saying that we should not place attention to the circumstances, but we should focus our attention on what's useful. And right now, it's basic hygiene measures: washing your hands, take care of sneezing. Try to sneeze on your elbow or with a face mask for sick people. Effective recovery should happen at home. Everybody that could show symptoms, so well, you do not need to confirm coronavirus in order to decide to stay home if you have fever, cough, throat ache, sneezing, etc. And these are the basic measures. And second one of all, the ones that we announced over the weekend, we're going to suspend temporarily all activities, the ones that do not affect or have an impact on government actions. Number two, do not go to massive concentration events, and that's over 5,000 people. That's a threshold, and to remain informed, trusting and respecting and listening and analyzing the fundamental information, the information that has a scientific baseline, and not propagating hearsay, because that we will go into a spiral of confusion, and sometimes it even has a higher impact than the virus itself. Mr. President. Okay, so we are going to ask Jesus Ramirez to present us the new campaign, or the new stage of this campaign against drugs. Good morning, and with your permission, Mr. President, effectively, as it had been announced last week, well, we are on a new stage of the campaign, of the strategic campaign in addiction prevention, and this is a campaign that has been directed to teachers, to parents, and we are going to talk about specifically the emotional, physical, social consequences, economical consequences that it's caused by substances, including alcohol and tobacco, which are not considered drugs usually, but that are the ones that harm Mexican health the most. They are the ones that are used the most, and they also have an impact on public health, right? So in this case, the slogan, the one that frames this new stage, is this idea that in the world of drugs, there's no happy endings. And we decided to talk about the world of drugs in order to include both offer and demand, right? Because we have the international standards in order not to stigmatize consumers, but we do like speaking the truth. We do like talking about the reality of what happens to these kind of people, mostly for an adolescent, a young people using chemical substances that would affect their physical health, and most than anything at a brain level, at a level of the brain cells. And well, all of this is what's going to be discussed throughout the campaign. Next slide, please. So we would like to inform young people, we would like to inform families that the abuse of this substances does affect the performance of people. It does has an impact on the intellect of people. Usually, you think that you can use psychoactive substances without any consequence. Actually, this has been normalized. This consume has been normalized. There are parties throughout the country called raves where they use methamphetamines where there is no control on what's being used. So we're going to show how methamphetamines are made. Apparently, this these harmless substances that make you live artificial paradises, well, they do have a consequence due to the substances that they're made of, and these substances are not under control, right? So this is why we're taking this new stage. So let's go to the next slide, please. Well, our starting point it's a thought: the war against worlds, the using violence in order to end this, well, had no favorable results. On the contrary, the use increased alarmingly, mostly amongst children. The age of use went down 10 years of less, and also the amount of women. Ever since 2007, the women that use drugs tripled, right? So it is important to think this. There is in certain regions of the country a true pandemic. It's been stated by the health authorities, for municipality authorities, and state authorities, where the usage of chemical substances, more than anything, crystal meth, well, it has turned into a social and economical problem in the north of the country. In the central east section of the country, we have found drug labs, and well, they are only producing, yeah, they're not only producing drugs for the international market, but also for the national market. We are a highly consuming country. So from the testimonies from young people, from public officers, from mothers, from women that tell us directly how it is that they are living this hell, the hell that Mr. President was talking about. Well, we want to raise awareness. We are also going to show scientific information, and also with a plain language, because sometimes talking technically, sometimes people do not understand the consequences if you have a very technical jargon. Well, we want to talk the same way that people talk in order for people to understand what the severity of the usage of drugs, the severity towards families and communities. So I will be playing some testimonies, and these testimonies are going to appear on a radio, on TV, on different media, and also throughout the press. So go right ahead. I am very afraid of society. So, crystal is a drug that I have loved and hated the most. I am fighting, so I won't use crystal anymore. It has caused the well that caused me was that I lost notion of the things that happened around me. I had a fallback, and I almost died. In the world of drugs, there is no happy ending. National Strategy for Addiction Prevention. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jair, and I am a drug addict and an alcoholic. What's great about doing things properly? If my parents don't place attention on me, I have 17 years of age. I am here because I abused drugs. All of my body hurted. I had to had complex B put into my body, and I need to sleep tied up because I can have seizures at night. In the world of war drugs, there is no final ending. I used to do cocaine. When I was 12, I started to have ecstasy. Due to my consumption, I decalcified all of my bones. I was given the PVC. I was killing her. Another guy tried to kill me. He actually shot, and I also fired a gunshot. and I killed that person. So in the world of drugs, there is no happy ending. National strategy for drug prevention. Sometimes they tell you, hey, if they give you a blunt, then you need to take that blunt. Right? My father hit my mom. I decided to go out of home. Many of them have been violated by raped by their parents when they're children, and they have not been able to overcome that psychologically. I want to die. I want to die constantly. In the world of drugs, there is no happy ending. National strategy for addiction prevention. I said, okay, I'm going to be a cop. You can get the truth out of everyone through torture. You can use, and we were called the alcoholics. I thought that I was a social drinker. I thought that I could stop drinking whenever I wanted, but it wasn't like that. I lost my family. I reached top bottom. I was eating spiders. I was eating scorpions. In the world of drugs, there is no happy ending. National strategy for addiction prevention. The first time I tried any substance, I was 12 years old. I tried out cocaine. The thing that has happened to me is that I've lost the respect, dignity, and I've lost my family. I started with a cigarette, then alcohol, then cocaine, and then crack. And physically, I was very thin. I was stocked out. My mom passed away year ago, and in her wake, I was I was taking drugs, and she was in the casket. The empowering of soul and heart of the person that thinks that has mastery of drugs. That's what's worst about drugs. I've had four suicide attempts, and I don't want to have another one. In the world of drugs, there is no happy ending. I used to have everything: family, work, friends. So I felt tired whenever I finished my shift. One day they offered me drugs. I was told that nothing would happen, that I would be able to control it, and it wasn't like that. I became its slave. I lost the battle and I lost everything. Even the dog left. Don't lose your freedom nor your health. In the world of drugs, there is no happy ending. And something else that we are going to emphasize, it's this section, and in this section we are going to show what are drugs made of, right? So that people knows that there are chemical substances that are used on our daily lives in order to clean the bathroom, in order to clean the kitchen, in order to kill rats, in order to get rid of pests, and that are used in order to make these substances. For example, the battery, the car batteries, well, the acid that is used in order for them to accumulate electricity, well, that's used for crystal, and this really damages the brain, the nervous system, and of course the whole body system, right? So play this, right? Do you know what synthetic drugs are made out of? Rat poison, caustic sauce, and also liquid for corpses, chloroform, borax to kill roaches. All of these chemicals are used in nasty clandestine labs in order to make drugs. Don't put this in your body. In the world of drugs, there's no happy ending. In the world of drugs, there's no happy ending. National strategy for addiction prevention. This last footage, and you're going to see this with the charts that we're going to show. It talks about the world of drugs and how the violence is being fed by criminal economy because the substances that many young people are using are tainted with blood, and we want to raise awareness regarding this, how this feedback of this violence, well, there's a certain social responsibility from the consumers without stigmatizing their use, but we want to show that the money that these drugs are moving around, well, those are actually feeding into the violent cycle. And this is why we have this kind of footage. And here we have some posters. We're going to have these billboards and we're going to put them on newspapers so that people will know this. Crack can turn you into a paranoid. Tobacco would end with your lungs. Who is using who? The crystal meth can affect your brain. Crack can cause psychosis and delirious, and for you to be delirious. To abuse alcohol can leave you with a family. Cocaine can leave you without anything. Crack causes delirium and psychosis. Methamphetamine destroys. As one of those posters show, it says the drugs are stained with blood. Don't get stained yourself. This is one of the messages for young people, but also this campaign needs to have its hope, right? Its hope aspect of things, of the social regeneration, of the possibility of overcoming obstacles or the darkest situations that are shown in life. And part of the strategy of fighting addiction is to generate opportunities for life, to have the possibility of facing adversity, emotional tools so that young people, children, families as a whole, well, so that we can face whenever we have any serious issues and whenever we don't have the necessary tools in order to face adversity, and they are looking for apparently easy exits such as the use of substances, abuse of substances, use of alcohol, use of drugs in order to look for easy exits, but that on the background there are consequences waiting in order to finish that easy exit, to finish that ending happiness, right? And we want to show examples that people, whenever they have, even though used drugs, they have become public figures in sports, in art, in athleticism. So they show us through their example that there is a possibility of being able to press forward, having a will and professional help. They have been able to press forward, and that's part of the addiction prevention, so that the public system can provide this help to youngsters that need help. This is something that we have been working alongside the Social Security in Mexico, the Health Ministry in Mexico, and also centers for young people, where they have been able to develop an attention. Very important in our country. We have been able to place attention on that. So this is very important for public figures. For example, Adrian Gonzalez, he is a baseball player in the USA, or Julio Urias, which is another baseball player alongside other baseball players. They are part of this campaign saying that baseball will protect you, but not only them. We also have Canelo Alvarez. He offers in a message the idea that the champion also needs to prepare and to act in the face of addiction. So there are many examples of success of sportsmen and sports people that correct their way from using drugs to becoming successful. So from that point onward, that this spokesperson talk to children, stating that they need to be ready and that sports is an option in the face of addiction. Addiction can be another rival to defeat, but a true athlete can overcome any adversity, and more than anything, if they are supported by their family. Sports is the best way to overcome Life, a true champion fights back addiction. That's why you shouldn't place your guard down. So, as a whole nation, let's fight for peace. Your friend, Canelo Alvarez. Well, baseball always protected me. I have a family that's together. It makes you forget about what's going on outside the field. If you are a baseball player, then you need to place the example for children. So I protected my family through baseball. With baseball, help me to get out of any addiction. Baseball will protect you together for peace. Baseball, it's a great doorway for young people. This is something that I liked ever since I was a children. This is a family sport. This is a friend sport. I had a lot of bad things happening at home. My dad left home, but I continued, and I'm successful in baseball. And not only baseball, any sport in our country, it's something good. Baseball will protect you together for peace. And this is how these materials look like of this new stage, and this is the final link in preventing addiction and fighting addiction. We do need the initiative or society's participation, and alongside the government, alongside the different entities of the government, we want to end this suffering. So we want to mimic what baseball players were saying in this pandemic that is being fed by violence. Well, we need to be together for peace. Thank you very much. Well, these are the two topics for today, so we would open the forum to questions. So there was a list of yesterday. There was a list from yesterday of people that hadn't participated. So was there a list? Oh yeah, it's right here. Erica, Erica, yeah. Good morning, Mr. President. Erika Ramirez from the Contralinea magazine. Hey, you have ordered to stop any tax exceptions. We know that you audit around 350,000 35 billion pesos to big contributors. And even though this amount is half the amount of credits that were canceled on the previous administration of Enrique Peña Nieto, still a high number due to corruption that we still have in this tax collection. So, how is your government going to face these mafias that we have within tax authorities? Well, we will continue to fight corruption because corruption needs to be eradicated, not only due to moral reasons, but also because in such fashion we can have budget. We can face any crisis if we don't allow corruption to exist. This campaign, this orientation campaign that's directed towards young people, it has companionship of the well-being programs for young people. The program of young people building the future, so that 900,000 young people have jobs as apprentices, and they can have a job, and thus they won't take the path of addiction. Also, we have scholarships. Yesterday we were saying that no matter what happens, rain or shine within the economy, the well-being programs are going to be upheld. They Those scholarships are still going to be there for young people. In the case of students of higher education students, well, we have 4.5 million students, and all of them will continue to receive their scholarships. And we can do all of that because we are eradicating corruption. how the corruption occurred before? Well, in contracts that were pumped up and popped up construction programs in acquisitions that were also made paying 2 or 3 times the real value of a finished good or a service. A corruption factor, well, those who did not pay taxes, the ones on the top, or they had their taxes pardoned or exempt, right? So we need to continue to clean from corruption our country, and everybody needs to pay taxes. And tax exempts are prohibited now. We already have a reform on the Constitution on the Article number 28. The same way that monopolies or we have trust laws, well, also tax exemptions are prohibited. We cannot just return taxes left and right. There is a return that comes from the sales tax that it's applicable because that's legal. But well, there were a lot of tax returns. We had a lot of tax returns without any legal framework, and we still have some. We're still suing some firms that, well, their whole purpose was to issue fake invoices, and that's still going on up until now. There's a gang. There's a gang of criminals, of white collar criminals, and they're still there. But we are placing complaints regarding that, and it is now being deemed a felony to the tax fraud. It's now a felony, and there's no one that can, or there's no contact that can help you out with that, because there are tax frauds committed by big companies that are evident for everyone, and they are being denounced. There's a case of a fraud of around 10 billion pesos of a operation that occurred in a single day, a simulated operation in order to avoid tax. And all of that, it's now over, because that's the way that we are going to have budget without increasing taxes, without increasing the price of fuel, without getting the country into debt. We are going to make Mexico pull forward. So this is why I am so adamant on fighting corruption. And it's not only so that all the people know this, it's not only for that, but rather so that you can get that into their brains, so that everybody that commits tax fraud, they should get that in their heads, because they were living in a fiscal paradise, in a tax paradise throughout the whole neoliberal period. So what they did was commit fraud after fraud towards tax authorities, and well, that was allowed because they financed parties and candidates.
Entonces, ya eso se
So
terminó.
now that's over.
Por más resistencias, por más campañas en contra
It
nuestra,
doesn't matter how many campaigns there
no hay
are
paso
against us, so
atrás
we are not going to
en
take
contra
any
de la
step
corrupción.
back in fighting corruption.
Y ya saben que yo soy perseverante.
And you already know that I am a little bit thick
No
headed,
voy
right? I am not
ni un
going
paso atrás, ni para
to
asomarme
take
incluso.
a step backward, not even if I need to
Acerca
take
de
impulse.
los
And
ataques
now, talking about any
sí,
attacks against
llevo
my
años
administration or myself, well,
recibiendo.
picture this: I have been receiving blows
Tengo
for many,
piel
many years.
gruesa.
So now my skin it's quite
Eh,
thick.
de modo que
In such
voy a
fashion,
resistir.
I would continue to resist any blows. Plus,
El que se aflige
if
se afloja.
you get down, then you get weak, right?
Aquí hay que tener
So you need
cabeza,
to
corazón
have head, heart,
y carácter.
and
Las tres C.
character, right? In Spanish, they'll start with C, so that's
Y
the
mucho carácter, mucho
C
autocontrol.
trifecta. And you need to have a lot of
Entonces,
character, right?
que
So
se convenzan los que estábamos
whoever
hartos de robar
were used to stealing, well, they
de que
should get
no
used
hay
to the fact
condiciones,
that there are no conditions that
pero
will
que
allow
además
them to continue
van a terminar estigmatizados
doing that. But also, they are
desde
also
hace
going
años
to be
vivimos
stigmatized. So
con
they are
familias.
damaging themselves, they are damaging their
Ya no
families.
se permite la corrupción.
Corruption it's no
Una
longer
segunda
permitted.
pregunta
A
sería, en
second
el tema de
question
la
would be
atención al nuevo coronavirus, nos
regarding
gustaría saber
care
si se está
towards the
haciendo
new
algún
coronavirus. We would like to
análisis
know if there's any
por parte del gobierno
analysis
nacional con
being
expertos en esta
performed
materia, como el secretario de
by
Defensa,
the
ante
defense
la agenda nacional de
ministry
riesgos y
because
contención,
beforehand on the
el tema de las
national agenda
epidemias y
for
las
risk we
pandemias como
took
una de las
epidemics and
10
pandemics as
amenazas
one of the
graves
10
a
big
la
threats
seguridad nacional en
towards
México,
national security
sobre
in
todo por las
Mexico, mostly
deficiencias
due to
que
the
teníamos en
deficiency
tema de
that
salud.
we used to have on
Están
the health
participando todo el gabinete de
system.
seguridad.
Well, the whole security
Les recuerdo que todos los días nos
board
reunimos
it's
y
working
AMLO
on that. We gather day in day
este,
out, and now
está invitado siempre al gabinete de seguridad,
we
el
always
sector salud.
have the health sector in
Hoy
those
estuvo
meetings. They were there today. They
y
had a presentation,
participa la
and
defensa,
the
el secretario de Marina, el secretario de
defense
Gobernación.
ministry is
Estamos
there,
juntos, de
the
hecho,
marine ministry
hoy
is there, the health
estuvo
ministry
el
is there.
secretario de
It's
Relaciones
a
Exteriores,
coordinated action.
el
Also,
secretario
the
de Educación,
secretary of public education
el
of exterior relations or international
responsable
relations was there as well.
de
The person that's
migración,
responsible of immigration
pero
policy was there as well. Everybody
todos
was
ellos
there, but the
son
ones that are
los
driving this meeting are the
especialistas
specialists.
desde el sector salud.
Physicians, the health
Pero no
sector is
sé
the one
si
that is providing support,
quieran
but I don't know
decir algo
if
más.
you would like for this to be further explained to you.
Con mucho
Yeah?
gusto.
Okay, well, I will
Conocemos la
happily
historia
do
de
so.
estas
We
dos
know
energías.
the
No
history
eran las
because ever
preocupaciones
since
primeras
2010,
para este
this
periodo
was not
pandémico.
considered on
El
the
resultado de la
national
pandemia
risk
fue en 2009,
analysis, right?
cuando
So
en
ever since
colaboración
we had
desde
the
nuestras
pandemic of
líneas
2009,
entre
we have
la
a
Secretaría de Salud,
cooperation
de
work
manera
that
específica en su
permeates up
momento
until now
desde la Subsecretaría de
through
Prevención y
the
Promoción de la Salud y Gabinete
sub-ministry
de
of
Epidemiología
fostering of health and
para la
also the
elaboración
epidemiologic
del Sistema de Seguridad
institution,
Nacional,
and we work
también en su momento de
alongside
manera
the national
específica
defense system,
iniciado a través
and
de
specifically
CISEN.
did started from the
Este
CISEN
trabajo lo
Institute.
tomamos de lecciones
So we
aprendidas
take
de
lessons
la
learned
pandemia de
from the
2009 y se empezó a articular
influenza pandemic
un
in
mecanismo
2009,
para tener
and we
un
started
reconocimiento de
to
instancias de
generate
seguridad
a
nacional
mechanism in
de
order for
ciertas
us to have
entidades claves como el
this
Sistema Nacional de
national
Vigilancia Epidemiológica.
this with the
Algunas
epidemiological
entidades
As such, some physical entities, such as the reference National Institute, they were placed into strategics of the highest order. And this has been evolving in the institutionality of the country. And effectively, we have been keeping up in a very narrow corporation for many years now. But also, whenever we started to prep for this phenomena, we had very early contacts with all of those mechanisms. We have announced as well ever since some time ago that a key element was a joint meeting with national committees for health safety that it's headed by the Minister of Health and the National Committee for Emergencies that is headed by the Secretary of Citizens Safety and Security. This was a crucial meeting because we still have a certain institutional vacuum that ever since we started this administration, well, we have been thinking about generating a reform so that the national emergency system, coordinated by the National Emergency Committee, well, it doesn't have the necessary elements in order to address pure hygiene emergencies, and those are the ones that don't affect physical infrastructure, as it's mostly recognized the ones of natural resources or human caused ones, because those are the ones that pertain to the national emergency system. This includes reserve systems of FOPREDEN and FONDEN, which are funds or trusts which amount of money is destined in order to address disasters or to prevent disasters that are related with this kind of damages of physical infrastructure. But whenever we have a pure health issue such as we had in 2009, we looked for mechanisms so that we could channel funds in order to provide care and to provide mitigation for the influenza pandemic. And there was no an institutional entity that was clear so that we could obtain them. So I would like to tell you, and this is great news, with the current legal framework, we were able to find the political will from the hygiene authority number one, which is the president, and also with the technical orientation of the number two hygiene authority, which is the health minister. And this has allowed us to channel ordinary resources for specific, like the ones that we just mentioned when we purchased this supplies. So summarizing, ever since the beginning, we prepped in order to face this epidemic, and we have considered a very broad universe that can be summarized in the quote, all the government, all society. Thank you very much. Yeah, I would gladly do so. Within health that's related to these kind of events, we have a committee that is a committee called the National Committee for Safety in Health, and another council, that another board that is called the hygiene committee. And the first one is being headed by the health ministry. It was is instated on 2002, and they have the capability of coordinated in several sectors, not only on the health sector, preparation and coordination of the response on behalf of that, right? So we have a subcommittee, a monitoring subcommittee, and a technical subcommittee for emerging diseases. This coordination instrument was the one that was placed ever since the beginning, and they gathered on January 30th whenever the health minister summoned them, and we established the points that we had started working on the interior aspect of things. And well, now it involves the rest of sectors within the administration. So far, this National Committee for Health Safety, and afterwards, with the help that came from this joint session with the Emergency National Committee, well, it has allowed us to have a great coordination efforts and adding up efforts due to the National Conference of Governors, an instance that has other purposes. It has also allowed us to reach a agreement point and unity of purposes, joint planning that has articulated the government mechanisms within the country at a federal level as well as at a states level. So far, all of the capabilities that are needed to be developed and needed to be instated in order to have an effective response have been properly coordinated, properly communicated throughout these mechanisms. In a given point in time, and ever since the beginning, we have taken into account this, and it could be that the response capability, particularly from society, well, that it is not aligned with the political will, right? And when we talk about political will, I am not talking about party politics, right? But rather the availability of components within society, the government, the private sector, the social sectors, so that we can have this unity in purposes. If this would be the situation and we had a resistance, an extreme resistance that would merit the special dispositions, then it would be okay for the Council of General Salubrity, which is the only educated hygiene authority, would take matters into our hands. And whoever doesn't know this entity, well, it is an entity that was created ever since the Constitution of 1957. It was created by President Juarez with the Congress of the Union back then, and it was established as a maximum authority for the matter of general hygiene throughout the whole nation, which dispositions are mandatory and they can be executionary. Who leads this? Well, the president. Who heads this and its day to day operations? The health minister. How it is comprised? Well, it is comprised basically by all entities of public administration. It has permanent guests, and we can make exceptions, and they can make exceptions if that will be the case. And I'll wrap it up by saying, and I will go back to the concept that I started saying at the beginning, we should not interpret by a direct analogy the dispositions that are being taken by other countries as if they would apply equally to Mexico or if we had a similar need. The word state of emergency, well, has different meanings in different areas around the globe. In certain cases, it has a particular emphasis in removing administrative barriers or cutting through red tape in order to free funds. In other cases, it focuses on political coordination that might not be contemplated on the framework, on the political framework of those countries. In our case, has been fully identified. This appears in Article number 73 of the nation's constitution whenever it talks about the attributions of the Union Congress. And well, they have four basic attributions that then later on broaden in their internal guideline. But I would like to insist, and I would like to wrap it up. Whenever we might need to, for us to deem this technically accordingly to make any extraordinary dispositions, of course, we would need to summon the General Hygiene Board. But this doesn't mean that if we were to summon them, is because we are going to take those measurements. I just want to be clear on that because we won't be able to say that perhaps afterwards we would call upon this council in order to have an educated discussion from cross sectoral, or so that we can make decisions and for them to take matters into their hands. But in essence, institutions and people that are going to be represented there are exactly the same people and institutions that have been gathering in meetings due to the fact that they have been summoned by the health minister ever since January 3rd. Okay, so now let's go with Raul Antonio Hernandez. Good morning, officers. My name is Raul Hernandez from El Barco Benco. Sir, I have a quote for you. In every good war, and it's good to visit because whoever owns the sea, well, we own the land. So Mexico is lacking this marine culture, and this is why I stated that quote. And I would like to say, and that's my say, it's a personal opinion. I think that the fourth transformation wouldn't be complete if you wouldn't take advantage with all of your strength that you have of this approval rate that you have, the generation or the fostering of marine culture. I would just like to show you three examples. Morelos had to use the North American Corso in order to get rid of the last Spaniard ships in our independence. Hidalgo, well, he couldn't do anything. Juarez, Benito Juarez, who you admire so much, and I do so as well. Well, he had a problem with Mariano Ocampo because he was wavering some territories, and well, he was very far away from a marine culture. In the case of Madero and Carranza, well, they didn't have that much of an opportunity, and Cardenas, perhaps he had some glimpses, but not really. So on the three previous transformation, nobody ever thought about having a proper marine culture. It was approved. The Canadian country has just approved the free treaty, and he there was no negotiations. Nobody was talking about the marine commerce, such as ports and whatnot. And also now on the way that your measurement, it's the measures that your government is taking in terms of the pandemic. Well, it's a little bit away from the observation that we should have in ports regarding controls. There's no sanitary control in ports. There's a lot of people there. Actually, yesterday, whoever came from the port of Coatzacoalcos, the captain there, used a measure. I don't know if this is for all ports, but they had to observe several measures whenever they needed to change their crew. Every boat that comes into a Mexican port, well, in this case, Coatzacoalcos. So what else? What else could I mention regarding this? For example, last week, sadly, and this is something that has to do with the topic of drugs when they were celebrating the 140 years of the Marine School. I think that a drugged up youngster of third semester, well, he beat it up a woman with a iron bar. Fortunately, this girl had the hands on her face, and fortunately, he only broke her fingers. But there's no observance there. There's no observance there. Mexico is a marine country with huge possibilities because we have a lot of wealth and a lot of power to be developed. So, with all respect to who you are in your national development plan, there's nothing regarding marine commerce. So, what can I tell you? Another aspect about the sea, it's fishing. There are fishermen in Nayarit, in Acapulco, that cannot go out and fish because these beaches are private property of hotels and the businessmen that unfortunately are not even Mexican. Baja California Sur, which is the state with a longer coast, well, there's a lot of people in their beaches that are not Mexican, and so I don't know what can you tell me about this, but there's a lot of people that have a high interest
in the nation, and they don't have any economic interest that would contribute with ideas. I have given you a document from Dr. Salgado and Salgado, who is a person that has a literary work that's impressive regarding marine law, and you could take advantage of this time that you want to make a change from the marine commerce over to the marine ministry, so that you can do something about it. I'd like to say this respectfully, sir, and I would like to say that I am very happy that, well, I would be very happy if your fourth transformation go down in history with a marine culture. Yeah, well, thank you very much. We're going to ask Almirante Ojeda. I believe that you have spoken with the Minister of Communications. Well, we're going to ask Almirante Ojeda to talk to you so that he can listen to you, and he will let you know everything that's being done, because well, we are actually working on that matter. We are managing marine ports and everything that's related to the marine ministry, right? So now that I went to Guerrero, to the coast of Guerrero, well, they both fishermen and townspeople, they of communities that lived in the coast, well, they told me that I should place attention on lagoons, on we need to see where a river ends, also to place protection for those populations, and our the marine ministry. It's helping us in all of this. As a matter of fact, ever since many years ago, we have acquired equipment in order to generate this kind of work that's very important in this kind of communities, in the rivers and we need to obtain dredgers in order to work on that. So the marine ministry is one of the institutions that's most important in the Mexican state. There are two pillars. There are two pillars that the Mexican state has, two institutions that are very important. One of them is the Marine Ministry, and the other one is the Defense Ministry. Okay, and I do understand your concern. I do understand that we need to drive the commerce, marine, right? The marine commerce, rather. And this is why I would like to ask you to get in touch with these ministers, and that way they can explain what's being done, and we will continue to strengthen everything that's related to marine commerce. 2% of the budget, well, doesn't allow for a marine commerce development because there is no culture of product commerce. $36 billion are paid in imports and exports, taking into account oil. Yeah, well, this got spoiled. The marine commerce got spoiled at the beginning of the neoliberal politics. We used to have a important marine commerce. It's like um, oil chemistry. It used to be an important industry. It was exemplary. We were tip of the spear worldwide, and it was destroyed. They turned it into junk. The same thing happened with marine commerce. Pemex had its own ships in order to transport oil. We had a infrastructure. Well, We don't have any more Mexican ships.
embarcaciones
All of them
extranjeras
are
entrando
foreign ones.
siempre.
Eh,
Lo que yo quiero
yeah,
también
and what I would like
se vaya tomando en consideración,
f- for
lo
you to
digo en
take
los
into
actos,
consideration, and
es
I say
muy
so by doing,
importantes,
and as a matter of fact, while doing it's very important
porque permiten
because
una información
this
más directa.
convey a much
Y
more direct information,
siempre
and
recuerdo,
always we have a
lo que
memory
decía Madero,
of what Madero used to say,
retomando una frase
going
bíblica,
back to a biblical quote.
el pueblo tiene hambre
The
y sed de
people
justicia.
are hungry and thirsty
Y
for
así estamos.
justice. And this is the
Así
way that we are
nos
right
dejó
now. This is the way that we
la
are
política
right
de
now.
pillaje
This is the way that
llamada
the plundering
neoliberalismo.
politic left us
Y
with,
tenemos que ir
called
saciando
neoliberalism.
esa
And we
hambre, esa
need
sed de
to
justicia
quench our thirst for
este,
justice.
de manera organizada,
We
planeada,
need to do so
porque
in a
eh,
planned fashion, in an
es mucho
organized fashion,
necesario
because we are
adelantarse.
delayed by
Entonces
quite a
tenemos que
lot,
ser
and thus
muy
we need to
eficaces
be very efficient
para
in order to
orientar nuestras
direct
acciones
our actions
a lo prioritario.
to our
O sea,
priorities.
pueden haber 1000
So we can have
demandas,
1,000
pero
demands, and they all might be
¿cuántas
right, but
podemos
how
atender
many can we really
que
address
tengan un
that truly
efecto
possess a
mayor
defect, a
beneficio a
major
la población?
defect that would benefit the
Mucha más
population?
ayuda
What I'm
colectiva.
saying, how can we provide a better
En
collective
esos
help,
casos,
right? So we're doing that.
eh,
We are doing that.
hay que optar
We need to
entre inconvenientes.
choose
Es decir,
amongst
todo
inconveniences. So what I mean is that we have a whole, right?
y dispersamos
And
los recursos
this whole, well,
o
will eat up all of our resources.
poco pero
Or
mejor.
if we have a small, not the
Esto,
whole lot, but that
eso es
a
lo
small
que
part would
todos
be
los
better,
días
right? So this is what
nos planteamos.
we do and ask ourselves every
Nosotros
day.
ya sabemos
We already know
cuáles son las prioridades
what
del
our
1 al 10
priorities are from 1 all the way to
ante
10
cualquier
in the
situación,
face of any
haya
situation,
coronavirus o no haya.
is with or without
Ya sabemos que
coronavirus.
lo primero
We
es el
know
bienestar.
that what comes first, it's the people's well-being. That's first and
Sí,
foremost, right there.
ya sabemos
We
que
also
tenemos
know that we need
que
to
mantener
keep
finanzas sanas.
healthy finances.
Ya sabemos que tiene
We
que haber
already know that we need to have honesty.
ya sabemos
We also
que tiene
know
que haber
that we
austeridad
need to have austerity,
republicana.
Republican austerity.
Ya
We also
sabemos
know
que tenemos que
already
impulsar
that we
actividades
need to
productivas y crear
drive
empleos.
productive activities and to generate jobs.
Ya
These
sabemos
are just
que
basic
tenemos
functions. We
que
already know
producir
that we need to
para no
produce
ser
in order not to be
dependientes. Que
dependent.
debemos de
We
producir
should
todo lo
produce
que consumimos,
everything that we use,
no comprar
everything that we consume,
en el
not to
extranjero.
purchase from abroad.
Eso es.
Well, the sea, it would be an
Ya
alternative.
sabemos
You're right.
cuáles son las
And yeah,
prioridades
well, we
básicas.
know which our
No podemos
basic
atender
priorities
todo.
are, and we want to
Yo
address
cuando voy a
everything.
las reuniones,
Whenever I go to meetings,
pues
well,
recojo las peticiones de todos.
I gather petitions from
Entonces
everyone
les digo,
all around, and then I
vamos
tell them, hey, well,
a
we are
atender
going to
primero
address
lo
first
colectivo, lo general.
the collective
Vamos a ir
aspect of
avanzando así.
things,
Y
right?
luego
We're
también
going to move forward like that,
las
and
demandas
then we are going to address
cada ciudadano.
every
Pero
citizen's
es parte
demands.
de lo que
But
hacemos en el
this is
Comité
part of
Comunista.
what we do.
Esto
This
es
is
muy
part of our
importante lo que
strategy, and
planteas.
this is very important. What you're
Hay que
saying is
verlo
very
en
important,
el marco
but we will need to see
de
this within
todas las
the
necesidades
frame
nacionales.
of all national
needs, right? So we need to talk with ministers, and we are doing things, of course, and we will continue to support on everything that we can according to its importance. Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, so now, Paul Ernesto, let's hear you out, man. Good morning, Mr. President. Two topics. First and foremost, more than a question, is a request. If you would agree or you could help us out, every Monday we issue a report on how the airport is doing on Santa Lucia. You would say that comparisons are not good, but they are quite interesting, though. So, can you show how the canceled new airport of Mexico City? So you can tell me in which point of time in the timeline would match the advancement of that, and when it would increase, in order to know what was done on the previous administration and what are the advancements of this work throughout your administration, in order to make a comparison not only in terms of construction but also in terms of budget. Well, General Vallejo is going to be here, as well as as well as Sandoval, General Sandoval, because we're going to have a presentation regarding that. We said that we are going to have a presentation for the Santa Lucia Airport, and I'm going to ask them to include this comparison from what it meant the beginning of this construction work in terms of expenses, advancements, and so forth, and well, comparing the previous one with the way that we are currently, and also what's going to happen with the previous construction site. And I would like to tell you that it's going to be turned into an ecological park because we are recovering the lake, right? So it's going to be turned into a leisure space, and also it's going to be turned into an ecological development space. Second question, Paul Velasquez, from not one more corrupt politician in the government. So next March 21st, we're going to celebrate the Down syndrome individuals, right? And the way to make them feel included, it's to wear mismatched socks. And also this month we're going to celebrate people with autism, and that day we celebrate that with a blue nose. So the question is, what's your government doing in order to include these two sectors on the labor force and the workforce, and also the health ministry? It's managing all of this. Can you tell us what's the state of health of these two areas, and talking about people with different capabilities, but also their families, their caregivers, which in the most cases are parents, our siblings, and the stress levels that these people are living with. And if in the future we could generate a project where in other countries, whenever there's a family with an individual with different capabilities, that family has preference when getting medical to going to a medical appointment, right? Because their people are caregivers and they cannot miss work. So we would like to know how they're doing, how their caregivers are doing, and also a project moving into the future. Even the U.S. has this, and even Disney amusement parks. Well, these people skip the line; they don't need to make lines. So we would like to provide that educationally, right, for them and their families. Well, what we are guaranteeing is that all children with different capabilities, well, they should have a pension. So we are doing that currently, and that's over 800,000 children that are receiving this kind of support, right? They also that's helping them out. Of course, we have discussed this before. Comprehensive care, it's best ever since prevention stages, and well, healthcare. So to provide this financial support,
un
is a
pequeño apoyo
small kind of support,
que sí
right? I know. I
les
mean, it does
es de utilidad,
help them
porque
because
se mantenían en el abandono.
they were in
Entonces sí, es ayuda,
the
pero estamos conscientes
uttermost
que no
abandonment
es
before, but we are
suficiente.
aware that it is
Se
not
necesita
enough,
más. Y
that
esto
much more is
médico,
needed.
pues
And
no
well,
sé si usted
from the medical
puede
aspect of things, I don't
intervenir.
know if there is anything that you
Sí, ingeniero.
might like to say, generally speaking. Hey, good morning, and with your permission, Mr. President, yes, as a matter of fact, that's one of the sectors of the population that requires the most preventive care, as stated by the President, and well, this is how our health system it's made out of. We want to prevent. But whenever this problem has been detected, because it has a long spectrum, there's disability in hearing, disability in sight, there is motor disability of walking and moving around. So we have different programs that are also run by different entities. Of course, the health ministry well, it's integrated with CIPINA. CIPINA, it's a very broad situation, and we are quite committed also with the education ministry and with a series of instances that require this care. Helps us to consider this alongside DIF. Well, we need to provide care and well, financial support does help because mm, that way, children and adolescents, even well, they are able to see things under a different light. So prevention starts when we classify every children whenever they're born. We screen them because many of these genetic conditions, not all of them, required an early detection, and we can have an early detection before even they're born, right? And we need to integrate this in our preventive action, right? So they should have screenings and well, this is a very general example, but also actions that are being taken on the environment. Well, they contribute not only to the factors that we considered originally, and we lack, and we recognize this. We lack companionship in the sense that we don't give the right place to disabled children, and we don't make a comparison according to what was signaled on your questioning. That we don't support the family itself, and obviously society should help us as well, just by signaling if someone has a vision disability, would know that they should be helped in an elevator or in public transportation. But in 15 days, we want to integrate these actions that are being taken and that should be taken because they're very important. Thank you very much, Minister. Do you have something prepped for Saturday 21st with in order to celebrate the Down syndrome individuals? And are you participating with ONGs? Well, I know that there is something that is going to happen on DIF, right? We need to consider the conditions, the epidemic conditions that limit any kind of big events, but well, we are taking it into consideration. Thank you very much.
Bueno, siguiendo esta lista que
Okay,
fue de
so
ayer,
following this
es
list
Julio
from
Omar.
yesterday's, Julio Omar is up next. Good morning, Mr. President and public officers. My name is Julio Mar from Baja California Sur, from Noticias Nación 14. And as my peer was saying, the term or the concept of privatization, in this case of beaches, it doesn't exist, but this is a common practice in Los Cabos because they have
fences, and they have private security on beaches, mostly in Medano, and the most important ones because there's hotels there and restaurants there, and it happens all across the country. Nonetheless, on the highest inflow areas and tourist areas, well, this happens on previous administrations. Corruption acts were the ones that gave away these areas and duplicated these permits, and it was done not properly. The access have been getting closed, and this pertain to the municipalities, and something that's very important. Society needs to get up every time to request for these accesses to be respected. To the beach access should be respected because beaches belong to all of us, and this is a systemic approach. And thus, well, we need to perform an audit or a diagnosis of these permits. But there's a corruption as such that whenever the Sofemat people go there to audit them, or alongside Semarnato, Cofepa, they remove the fences of those misunderstood permits more than anything, and that area it's the one that it's the worst simulation that I've seen in my whole life. They take out the fences and the security personnel stays outside as if nothing had happened. And this is something that we need to address because beaches belong to everyone, and everybody should be able to enjoy them, not just a few due to economic interests. So that's what I wanted to tell you, and we would need to reassess these permits, and we need also to reassess the ones that are going to be provided later on. And next, it's what's your take on the statement from the president of of El Salvador in terms of what happened yesterday, and what's your stand as chief of state, right? Because the Mexico's government have supported you, and Mexico have supported you in terms of immigration and well-being. So those are my two questions. Well, regarding the beaches, well, we need to be careful on that. We need to keep our public beaches because, yes, you are right. Beaches have been privatized in tourist centers. Besides that, um, you're right. Turtles are no longer being able to lay eggs, right? So we need to take care of turtles, of course. But we have been suffering from this. All of this period, we have been suffering from this. So that's another stain. That's another stain on the rap sheet of the neoliberalism. In Cancun, we only have one public beach. That's it, one. And people need to leave very early so that they can go to Cancun. Now in Playa del Carmen, because we're carrying out a regularization plan. There is a lot there, and in that lot, we are not going to sell it because we want to turn that lot into a public beach and into a park. And we are working on that. We want to respect public spaces. We have not given any authorization for that. Is the same thing that's happening on the field, and I would take advantage of this moment to say this. For example, baseball fields are turned into soccer fields, but what's worst is that those are baseball fields, soccer fields. Okay, these are public spaces that are later to malls, turned into malls due to corruption and people with influences, and also due to the lack of awareness. We just
Estuvo mucho mejor.
corrected ourselves, and I really
El
enjoyed
secretario de
the
la Defensa
attitude from the defense
y de
minister and
general
from
de los ingenieros
the general of the
que fuimos
military engineers,
a
because
inaugurar
we went down and we
un ministerio
inaugurated
para la Guardia Nacional. Nos están
facilities for the
explicando.
National Guard, and they are
Entonces dicen,
explaining this
esto
to
fue
us, and they
reconocido
tell us this a lot
municipal.
was given to us by the
Nos cedió. Era
municipality.
una cancha
It was given to us. It
que
used
era
to be
un
a
campo de
field. It
fútbol
used to be a soccer field.
muy...
And I
Entonces
said, ooh.
yo hice así
I
y
made this
dije,
face,
¿cómo?
and I said, how come? I mean,
Este, y ya de inmediato
and then
el
immediately
general,
the general
secretario y el general
or the secretary
dijeron,
of the
ustedes
general,
dijeron,
they said,
reponemos,
hey, yeah, well,
hacemos
we're going
el
to
campo
build
de fútbol,
another
nosotros lo
soccer
hacemos.
field. We are going to take care
Pero se
of
hacen
that.
las cosas
But things are
por una
being
inercia
done with momentum.
donde cosas que son fundamentales,
Things that are
espacios
fundamental,
públicos,
such as public spaces,
no son tomados en
well,
cuenta.
are not taken
Yo
into
cuando
account.
estuve de jefe de
When
gobierno,
I was the head of
me estaban
Mexico
proponiendo
City, when I was governor of
que
Mexico
diéramos
City,
un permiso
well, I was
para que
asked
una
to give
unidad
permission
deportiva
so that
privada
a private sports
se convirtiera en plaza
company,
comercial.
well, for it to be turned into a mall.
Y lo que diga mi dedito.
And you can look at my finger right now.
Y era un negocio de
And
millones de
it was
pesos
a million pesos
y
business,
de mucha influencia.
and with a lot of influence.
Pero por la misma zona
But
que acabamos de comprar el deportivo que estaba
around the same area, we
en
had just
Banrural,
acquired the sports club that was from Bank Rodal
para
around
dejarlo a los
Tlalpan,
adultos
in
mayores
order to leave that for
y
the
lo compramos.
elderly, and we
Bueno, hice
acquired it.
un
And I just heard
el
about
director
this
de la financiera
recently.
rural
The director of
que era
the
de Ban
rural
Rural
financial company, or what
era
Ban
Mitri
Rural used to have, it was Mitri.
y a él le tocó
And it was his turn to
vendernos
sell that
en ese
to
entonces
us
el deportivo
back then. Back then, he sold us this
porque
sports facilities, this
teníamos que
sports club,
evitar que se vendiera
because we needed to avoid
y
it
se
or keep
convirtiera
it from
en una
selling it,
plaza
because we
comercial.
did not want it
Afortunadamente
for it to
se
turn
adquirió y ahí
into
está
a mall. We acquired,
para
and
los
it's
adultos
still
mayores.
there,
Pero
and
en el
it's
caso de
for
la ciudad
the
y en el caso
elderly. But in the
de
case of the city and in the
todas
case
las ciudades,
of all cities,
no se debe de
we
seguir
shouldn't
promoviendo
continue to
el
foster
concreto, las
concrete,
canchas de concreto,
the concrete all over.
porque además de que son espacios
Because
para el deporte,
besides being
son
that
espacios
they're
para la
sports
recarga de
areas,
los
those
mantos
are
acuíferos.
spaces so that
Si todo
aquifers
es
can
concreto,
recharge. If everything's made
toda
out
el
of
agua
concrete, if
va al
all the
drenaje,
water would go directly into the
no
drain,
hay filtraciones.
there's no filtering.
Eh, entonces, eso que
So
te estás planteando en las playas es muy bueno
what
y
you're
es un
telling me
llamado a
about the
prevención
beaches is great, and it's also a
para que
calling,
cuidemos de
taking
nuestros
advantage of the
espacios. Se
situation
habla
for
de
us to
prevención.
take care of our spaces,
¿En
because
dónde se va a
we
hacer la
talk about
prevención?
prevention, and when are
O
sports going to take place? When are
eh,
when are
el esparcimiento, el
where are
disfrute
people
con la
going
familia,
to
si no se
play
puede ir a la
sports, or
playa.
where can you enjoy your family
Ahora
if you
que
cannot
está
go
esta
to the
situación
beach? So now that this
del
situation
coronavirus,
has arisen, the situation regarding
que nos están
coronavirus,
recomendando
well, they
de
are
que nos guardemos,
recommending us to stay home.
pues sí,
Well, yeah, they
pero
are.
que al mismo
But at
tiempo
the same time,
sí, haya
we should have
un sano
a
acercamiento
healthy approach
eh, con nuestras familias,
with our families,
que nos acerquemos,
so that we can get close
que
to our
aprovechemos
family members. We can take advantage
para fortalecer
of this in order to
nuestros
strengthen
lazos
our
nuestra integridad.
links, our
Familiar.
integrity within the family.
¿Sí? Eh, el que nos ayuden a fortalecer
It
valores,
should help us to
culturales como
strengthen our
este,
values,
el deber
cultural
ético,
values,
por el que
spiritual
no han
values.
estado estas vacaciones
So,
anticipadas.
being that we are going to
¿Cuántos
go
no
into vacation ahead of time, well, we
que
should
se les escuche más,
listen more to our children
que no todo sea
because not everything should
la tablet,
be
que haya más convivencia, que haya más comunicación,
electronics.
que se
We
hable
should rather
mucho
have a
en
better
familia,
communication. We should
de
talk each
que
other
solo siendo buenos
amongst family members
podemos ser
because only
felices.
being good, we should have that as a
No
discussion topic. Only
esto
being
que
good, we
vivimos
can
ahora
be
tan
happy,
horroroso.
not what we saw
¿Cómo es el lema?
on screen that was hideous. So, what was
En
the
el mundo de las
slogan?
drogas no hay
In the world of
final
drugs,
feliz.
there's no happy ending.
Decir lo contrario.
So we need to say
Solo siendo
the
buenos podemos
opposite.
ser
Only
felices.
being good,
¿Sí?
it is
Y es
that
lo que
we
nos
can be
enseñaban
happy.
a hacer
And
bien
what
o
we were
sin
taught
mirar a quién.
before, do good without looking to
Y
who,
no, se
to
es
whom, right?
importante por la
So
ropa,
it's not
por la
you're not
marca.
important due to the brand of clothing that you're wearing,
Es
but you're
importante
rather important
por los
due
sentimientos
to your feelings. You're important due to your
con sana distancia,
well, with a healthy distance, right?
tener acercamiento.
We should
Con la familia.
have
Entonces,
a closer relationship
dedicarnos
with
mucho
our
amor.
family, and we should give each other
Yo
a lot of love.
celebro
I truly
la
celebrate
fraternidad que hay
the fraternity
en
that
la familia
we have
mexicana.
within the Mexican family.
Es algo bellísimo
It's something that's
ver
beautiful
a los padres
to look at
cargando
parents
a sus niños, a sus
carrying their
nietos
children,
contentos,
being happy,
los adultos, la alegría
adults,
de las
the
familias,
happiness and the joy of families,
la solidaridad que existe.
solidarity that
Bueno,
exists.
todo eso es
Well, all of that
mucho, muy importante. ¿Qué
is
otra cosa
very, very
decías?
important. What else were you saying?
Lo de el presidente de El Salvador lo respetamos mucho.
Oh, yeah, the
Y
Salvadorian president.
no,
Well,
no
we
vamos a
respect him
polemizar.
quite a lot, and we
Nosotros ya
won't get
definimos
into
una
any
política
controversy.
en
We have
materia
already defined
que
a
desconoce
policy in this
el
matter, and
sector salud.
this matter it's been driven
Eh,
by the health ministry.
no
So
vamos a
we won't
actuar
really act out
confrontándonos con nadie.
by confronting anyone.
Desde luego,
Of course,
enfrentar el coronavirus significa
facing coronavirus also means
respetar
respecting
los derechos humanos,
human rights.
garantizar los
We
derechos
need to guarantee human rights.
humanos, no caer en
We
discriminación.
should not discriminate.
Eso, ¿no? Cuando empezó lo del coronavirus,
Whenever the coronavirus started, remember
ya
this.
no querían permitir el desembarco
You didn't want
de
anyone
turistas.
getting off the plane. You didn't want any tourists to get off the cruise in Cozumel. And I
¿Cómo los van a dejar
said, and I asked them
en un
that
barco?
they could get off the boat, right?
En un
Because how
crucero.
come they're
Allá
going to
llevaban
be
los
left
portes,
in
¿cómo
a
los
cruise
dejaban?
and two ports
Eso
didn't
es
allow them to
violatorio
disembark?
de los derechos
Well,
humanos.
that
Eso se
goes
tiene que
against human
hacer.
rights. That's
Si había
discrimination.
problemas,
And
estaban
if they had any
infectados,
problems, if they
se
were
necesitaba
infected,
para
then
curarlos,
we needed
para
to get
atenderlos.
them out in order to provide care.
Esto es elemental.
This
No
is
puede caerse
fundamental.
en la paranoia.
You cannot be so paranoid.
En esos extremos, no.
You cannot go
No
to
estoy
those kind of
haciendo
extremes.
referencia al
I am
caso de El
not
Salvador.
referring to the
Yo
case
tengo
of El
muy buena amistad
Salvador. I have a great
con el
friendship
presidente de El Salvador.
with the
Son
president from El
auténticos guerreros.
Salvador, and well, They have their own politics, and well, we respect them. But in the case of those that are going to stay here with us, well, then they have protection, and they are going to be provided care. If they are sick, we will take care of them,
sean del país que sean.
regardless of which country they're from.
Es fraternidad universal.
That's universal
Y se
fraternity,
demostró, además,
and it
que no
was
había problema
shown.
de
It was
orden
shown that there was not a
hubiese
problem with them. But
habido
if they would
los
have been, well,
enfermos,
if they
los
would have been
cuidamos.
any people that were sick, well, then we will take care of
Simplemente
them right here.
elemental
This is
del ser
an
humano. Ser
elemental
atendido
right from the
cualquier
human
momento.
being to receive health
¿Mm?
care regardless of where they
Entonces,
are in the world.
eh,
So,
no vamos nosotros
we
a
are
triunfar
not
con nadie,
going
son
to
nuestras
confront anyone.
políticas
These are our
de
policies. This is
atender
our
a todos
policies, and we would like to
y nuestra
take care of
estrategia que va
everyone
a
and
continuar.
the strategy that it's going to continue.
Primero, no permitir que se
What's your
sigan
plan to recover the
derramando
beaches? Well, first and
dinero.
foremost, we
No
won't
podemos
give any
que se justifique
more permission. We
privatización.
won't give any more permit that
O
would
sea,
turn a beach
garantizar
into private property. We would
que haya
like
calidad.
to
Claro,
guarantee
puede
that there are public
llevarse a
beaches.
cabo desarrollos, desde luego,
We
turísticos,
can, of
pero
course, have
garantizando que haya
developments. We can
para
develop on those
para
tourist
la gente,
areas, but we need to
playas
guarantee
públicas.
public
Eso
beaches for the
primero.
people.
Y lo que les comentaba
First and foremost, and also what I was saying,
del caso de Playa del Carmen,
everything that I was
que
saying
hay un
in
terreno
Playa del Carmen, there is a lot
estamos
there,
buscando
and we
que se
are
convierta en una playa pública.
looking for that lot to be
Recuperar
turned
todo lo que
into a
podamos.
public
Eso es lo que
beach to recover everything that we can.
bueno,
That's what we
vamos
want.
con
Okay, so
Carlos.
now we're going to answer Carlos's question.
Sí, bueno, buenos días, señor. Buenos días, señor
Well,
presidente.
good
Buenos días,
morning, Mr. President. Good morning. Yeah,
O
well,
sea, es mucho el desequilibrio.
there's a lot
Mañana
of
pura mujeres.
unbalance. Tomorrow,
Mañana pura mujer. Va a haber
tomorrow only women.
Sí,
So,
presidente,
last
buenos
question.
días,
Hey, okay,
gabinete de
Mr.
salud,
President, and
funcionarios.
good morning, officers
Gracias, presidente. Bueno,
and
nada más quería hacer una pregunta. ¿Están tomando
Minister
medidas
of
de
Health. Well,
manera
my
preventiva?
question is,
Porque,
are you
pues también
taking
de repente
preventions in
se
the
escapa
border?
por eso
Because
del
I've been
ocurrido
told,
del
hey,
diario
this is
Correo de la
from
Noticia,
the
se reporta un desabasto
Nuevo
total
Laredo diary. There is
en
a
el lado
complete lack
mexicano
of
y del lado
supplies
americano han
in the
venido a
Mexican
hacer
area,
compras
and well,
de
people have
pánico,
come to make
injustificadas,
panic
como bien lo
purchases
señalan.
that
Es
are
un
not
proceso de
justified, as you've
desinformación
stated. This is a
fuerte,
process of
inclusive
misinformation that's
yo
very
lo veo
strong,
en
that
las
is
colonias
perceived. I see
populares,
this on
en los
neighborhoods
expendios de comida donde va la gente de edad
here
media
and in
de la colonia y
bodegas
pues
where
esto
people
estaba pasando,
purchase,
pero
and
esta
well,
situación
there's a lack of
de
supply
pánico irracional.
due to irrational
Evidentemente,
panic.
en lo particular,
So,
yo con permiso le
particularly,
pregunto al
I
corresponsal de la
want to
frontera,
ask you, being that I come
allá en
from
la
the border,
frontera,
over at
qué
the
medidas se
border,
están
which
tomando con
measures
la
are
reforma
being taken?
acuicultura.
It's a
Y la
very
otra
punctual
pregunta muy
question.
puntual,
That's one. And the
con
other question that
referente
I
al
have, with a lot of
reconocimiento
respect and
al gran
recognition
esfuerzo y
to the great
haciendo
effort and
integral que
example
nos da el
and comprehensive
presidente,
example that the
real.
president is
Sentimos
giving
nuestro
us, it's
reconocimiento,
real. We
pero
feel it. We are
sabemos que
with
nadie
you,
tiene
but
el
we
monopólio de
know
la
that
verdad
nobody has
y
the
nadie tiene,
monopoly of knowledge, and
en
nobody,
una organización
and
tan compleja
within a
como algo tan
ever
complejo
so
para el país,
complex
que
organization,
ha
an
sido
ever so
prometedor para
complex moment
nosotros
for the
por
country, and
tanto
so
tiempo,
promising for
que
us for
realmente
such a while,
cada quien
in
desde
a
su trinchera
struggle that
llevó a
everybody
cabo.
from their
En
trenches
primer
carried
lugar,
out.
aclarar una
Well, first
cosa,
and foremost, I
la
would like to
corrupción sí,
clarify
pero
something.
acompañada de
Corruption,
impunidad.
yes, but
Y este
accompanied
binomio
by
me refiero que más de ahí
impunity.
sigue. No
It's
podemos omitir
what's been worse for
cuando hablamos de
Mexico.
corrupción,
We
es impunidad.
cannot
No estamos de
talking
acuerdo, señor
about, or
presidente,
we cannot
jamás
talk
que no
about
viene acompañado
corruption
de cierta
without
impunidad. Si no,
impunity,
nada
right?
funciona.
If not,
Número dos,
well, if
hablando
they're
de
together,
puntualidad,
nothing will
con
work.
el
So
prudente
that's
ejemplo
number
y
two.
fue un caso muy esclarecedor y por respeto a los compañeros
So out of
y a
respect
quien
of
producimos,
my peers and your time,
es evidente
it is
ante la
evident
situación de
on on the face of the oil prices, and here I have not mentioned the Black Monday. I have not mentioned that Trump said that there's not going to be a recession over at the U.S. We have not mentioned that we have had 2 years with zero growth expectation. So what the president is doing is very important, and it's not easy. But I just want to tell you, hey, if we want more in the treaty, we should continue the same neoliberal policy of not doing anything. It's not a paradise in itself. So, well, these were not the results that we expected, because I don't see that there is any program for the situation for this pandemic in an economic terms, and I don't see any kind of economic reactivation. I don't see that we have any, well, to be able to reactivate the internal market. And you said that you were going to talk with the coordinator of programs, and it's been 2 weeks. So I'm saying this as a citizen, as a parent, right? So I would like to pinpoint these things to you. You are right. You are right on your two questions. First, or the two thoughts, right? So, number one, that fighting corruption, we should also fight impunity. Yeah, that's clear. That's clear enough, of course. And we are acting in that sense. And the other thing that we want to do is that, well, we need to do anything that it's needed in order to drive the economy. So we said that we are going to show you a plan for growth, for economical growth, ever since from the development of the energy sector. We are finishing up that plan, and we are driving, we are fostering everything that has to do with development. So I'll just give you one piece of information, which is good, and I'm sure that tomorrow that's going to be highlighted by the Pemex director. But we are increasing production. We are increasing oil production. So this took time, and this took work, and this took investment, and we could help in order to stop the drop on oil production. Because picture this, it really took us, the drop on oil price, it got us with a production drop as well. So you can picture the trend, right? If we wouldn't have done anything, well, now price dropped, but we have production. Imagine, prices dropped, but if we don't have any kind of production, then it would have been fatal. Well, we are now starting to produce more oil, and we were able to do so in 13 months, 15 months. We were able to achieve that in 15 months. We were able to turn that around. So tomorrow we are going to discuss that, and it has to do with economical development. The same thing goes with the fact that, well, if we have gas, for example. This is Interpreter. Thank you for tuning in. We'll continue with our broadcast, live broadcast of the coronavirus daily update at 7 p.m. UTC -6 Mexico Central Standard Time. Thank you very much.